Okay, as advertised, today we're going to talk about the Protestant Reformation, led by Martin Luther there in the center, the guy with the little black hat, that eventually leads to a lot of wars in Europe and colonization of other parts of the world, especially the Americas, what becomes the United States. All of this bleeds out of the Reformation. It sets in motion a division within the Catholic Church of Western Europe that has reverberations even into today. Okay, what we're going to try to answer, okay, by looking at this stuff is how did the weakening of the Catholic Church allow for people to speak against the church? Remember that the church has become weaker a lot because of the Black Death, with the death of so many clergymen, but also the failure of prayer to stop it. You have the futility and the losses in the Crusades, where if the opinion that the church was doing the right thing, it would probably have won, and a lot of other things that I will now talk about. Okay, begins really prior to the time that's officially known as the Reformation, which is more in the 16th century, early in the 14th century, when a man named John Wycliffe kind of starts a little mini revolution in England. Okay, he believed that the church should give up its earthly possessions and should be poor because Christ lived a life of poverty. He translates the Bible into English from Latin, which is a big no-no because this allows people to read it in their own language and takes it away from only people who know how to speak Latin telling you what's in there. So they lose some control over it. His views become so unpopular with church officials that he is removed from his teaching position. He's eventually excommunicated, and he is sheltered by the King of England and allowed to continue his talking. But if he leaves England, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Okay. Another reformer is over in what we now know as modern-day Czech Republic and kind of southeastern Germany. His name is Jan Hus. He's born in southern Bohemia in 1370. Bohemia is this area on the map that you see surrounded in red. Okay, he becomes a priest and soon after begins preaching against the immorality and the worldliness of the Catholic Church. The fact that you have cardinals and popes and bishops running around in fancy robes, gold-plated carriages, living in palaces. This becomes an underlying theme of much of the Reformation. Okay, 1412, he's excommunicated by the Pope, Gregory XII. He's later arrested because he doesn't stop his preaching. He's tried and he's burned at the stake. Remember, at this point in time, 1412, the church is still the most powerful organization, political organization, and spiritual organization, if not on the planet, definitely in the Western world. Okay, what is known as Western Europe, England, France, Spain, Italy, modern-day Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, all these areas that you see on the map that are shaded kind of in, there's a multitude of colors. We'll get into it in more detail a little bit later on this map. Okay, all these areas that are either green or red or orange are all areas that were Catholic. Only the blue and the areas in yellow of the Muslim areas are areas that were not controlled by the Catholic Church. Wycliffe and Huss are the first and most influential of the church guys who openly criticize the church. And though their views are condemned by the church and not widely accepted by ordinary people, it begins a discussion that eventually lead to reform and division. Okay, so causes. Renaissance and humanism, this focus on the individual, leads people to question church authority. You begin to have strong monarchs. Sometimes they increase their power by going against the church. And then you get these ordinary people who are living in towns and seeing their local clergy riding around living like kings. And they say, what's going on with this? In addition, people have to pay fees for everything. Marriage, baptism, burial, any kind of thing. And then on top of this, the church says you can buy your way out of sin by selling you an indulgence. Okay, it's a pardon from sin. It's a way for the church to get rich. But it's something that a lot of people question. And the first person who really questions this openly and has any weight to it is a guy named Martin Luther, German monk. The story goes that he wrote 95 theses, which we will look at in a little detail in class, arguments against the church, and he posted them on the door of the cathedral in Wittenberg, Germany. Luther is fervently against the sale of indulgences. He has traveled to Rome and he has seen up close um, the Pope and others basically just got cash registers on the altar and were selling salvation. He also believed that Christians could only reach heaven through faith in God, that good deeds and things like that had no place in it. He also said priests don't have any special powers. They're just ordinary people that may be a little bit more learned in the Bible and therefore can interpret for people. But he thought people should have a personal relationship with God and it shouldn't have to go through their local priest. He believes the Pope is not entitled to grant this pardon for the sins, that people had to do penance for it. He believed the Bible is the only source of truth. So he said if it wasn't in the Bible, it's not church law. Eventually he is excommunicated for these complaints against the church, but his ideas continue to spread across northern Germany and Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. Okay. His followers originally called themselves Protestants. You'll note the word protest within that word. And eventually, as you have more of these Protestant factions cropping up, they begin to call themselves Lutherans. And many of the people who have emigrated from Northern Europe and Scandinavia were of the Lutheran faith, and there are Lutheran churches all over North America. He translates the Bible into the local language or the vernacular. And he believes that priests should be allowed to marry, and he himself marries a former nun who leaves her nunnery because she believes in what Luther says, that this should be allowed, and they have a long and productive marriage with a whole lot of children. Okay. The other major reformer is John Calvin. He's born in France, and he believes that Christians could reach heaven by faith alone. He also believes that people are born sinners. This whole idea of original sin from Adam and Eve is espoused by Calvin. But then he takes kind of, in my mind, kind of a left turn or a right turn away from this idea that you're born sinners, because he says there's also this idea of predestination, that God determined at the beginning of time who is going to gain salvation and go to heaven. And Calvin believed that you had to even though you've got this, you already are going to heaven or you're not, you're already saved or you're not. He believed you had to live a strict, frugal, disciplined life. In spite of this very harsh life that he espouses, and to me kind of contradictory ideas of predestination, but the fact that you're born a sinner and you have to live a strict, frugal, disciplined life if you want to get into heaven, I have trouble meshing them together in my mind. How they go together, and a lot of other people have, because the idea of predestination has a little bit backed away. But his ideas spread across Germany, France, Holland, England, and Scotland. He personally leads a community in Switzerland called Calvinist. Many of the people that lived in Germany, France, Holland, and especially England who are persecuted because of their following of Calvin eventually pull up stakes and they move to what is now modern day New England. And we know them as the Pilgrims and the Puritans. So a lot of these people, to escape persecution, moved to the Americas. Okay? Why does this all happen? Well, you have a need for reform. Loss of confidence in the church due to the first you had the two popes, one in France, one in Rome, who both claimed to be in charge. You have the Great Schism, the split with the Eastern Orthodox Church. You have the failure of the Crusades, the belief that if the church was doing the right thing, why didn't the Crusades work? And then you also have the Black Death. The church has become very worldly. Church leaders live the life of princes and kings. They're very material wealth. The church is the largest property owner in Europe. You have this tithe, 10% of everyone's income, and it gets sent directly to Rome. It's not used in the local community. And a lot of belief that the wealth that the church is gaining was used to glorify the people running the church and for their own personal comfort, and not to do the mission of the church. This leads you into what is known as moral corruption. Okay, nepotism. You had people taking care of family members and appointing them to be cardinals and bishops and things like that. Even in some cases where they weren't even ordained priests, they got the job because they were related to the pope or the bishop. And then you had simony. If you weren't related, you could often buy a church office or some sort of ecclesiastical preferment to get ahead on the spiritual side. And then finally, you had the interference with commerce. Church prohibits charging interest on loans. This affects a lot of people's business. It leads to the Jews becoming the money lenders of Europe and actually of the Middle East, also because Islam prohibits usury. The sale of indulgences is probably the single biggest spark to this flame of reformation. Okay, you could reduce or eliminate any punishment for sins, and it was seen as buying away your way into heaven. Many people begin to question church authority, both rulers who look at, first of all, the church telling them what to do and say, I'm the king, I'm anointed by God, I don't need you to tell me what to do. They also see it as a way to take some of the church's land. And then you have a lot of individuals who question this whole worldliness and the sales of indulgence, and so they protest the church. In class, we will look at much more deeply Luther's protest, but in the meantime, you need to complete the quiz on Google Drive and submit it.